My name is Mike Whitmer, and I've been here at Living History Farms for over 30 years. In fact, I've been here longer than most of the people I work with have been alive. And, most days a pretty great job. Some days I get to work with oxen and horses, and this afternoon I was driving a nice brand new John Deere tractor. So, and antique cars and tractors as well. So. This is Ben and Judah, and they're our main team of horses. We've had them about coming up on 13 years. They're about 20 years old. That would be the equivalent of a person maybe close to 60. So they're starting to think about retirement. When we first got them, they were quite a handful. Ben is a bully, and Judah's pretty flighty. Judah's the one with the bigger star on his forehead. And Judah, things like water hoses were boa constrictors to him. Scared him to death. And like I said, Ben was kind of a bully. You'd send someone in to put their halters on and put them in their spots, and all of a sudden you'd hear a lot of commotion and yelling and screaming, and you'd come in and Ben would be standing on the poor person's foot. And he'd just stand there until he was done, and then he'd let them go. Hi there, this is Calvin, and over here is Sam. And these are another pair of draft horses. These guys are gray. Percherons were the most common draft horse in America, again in the 19th century and early 20th centuries. And these guys are pretty big. Calvin is 18 hands tall. That's 6 feet tall at his shoulder here. Sam is almost that tall. Sam weighs about a ton or a little more. Calvin here weighs about 2,300 pounds. So he's our biggest horse altogether. And he kind of thinks he's a giraffe or an elephant. He likes to stretch out and eat everything he can. Like I said earlier, these guys will eat 40 to 50 pounds of hay a day, and more if they can get it. Luckily now the pastures are starting to grow a little bit, so they are getting a little bit of fresh grass, so that's kind of a treat for them, and hopefully the grass will keep growing. Brandi is a mule, and mules made up between 5 and 10% of the horse population here in Iowa. They kind of peak as a percentage in the 1930s. And mules had some advantages over horses. They were tended to be more durable because of their hybrid vigor, and they were used for construction. The Army liked mules. They had a little bit better hooves. They tolerated heat better, so mules were more popular down south. In fact, some Iowa farmers were breeding mules up here and then shipping them to Missouri and Arkansas to the south of us where there was more demand. Her father was a donkey, and her mother was a Belgian draft horse, so she's a pretty good sized mule. She weighs about 3/4 of a ton, and she's actually about the size of most of the horses you'll find on farms in the year 1900. Really big horses like Calvin, they're not very practical. They're a little bit bigger, a little bit too big for some of our machinery even. They kind of have a bad reputation with some people. There's not much middle ground with mules. You either love them or you hate them. And they have a reputation for being stubborn, but it's more that they're pretty smart. Brandi here, you give her a command, she kind of thinks about it. There's a little bit of a lag as she thinks about whether she's going to do it or not. Horses, they tend to be more excitable. Brandi's pretty calm. And pretty steady, and so that's one of the reasons they were preferred. Their stubbornness comes because they won't overwork. You can overwork a horse and work him till he literally drops dead, but a mule is going to say, this is enough, I'm done for the day. Brandi here is our oldest horse. She's in her mid-20s, so she's the equivalent of somebody in their late 60s, maybe early 70s, so she's pretty much retired. She does help us out here. She helps cultivate the corn at the 1850 farm, where the rows are only about 100 yards long, so she gets to rest at the end of each one. She helps us pull hay into the barn here. That's a job where you stand for 5 minutes and work for a minute, or at least she does. And then her favorite thing is to pull our buggy. She's the only horse we have that's small enough to fit our buggy, and that's her favorite job because then she gets to get out and see more of the world.